What's up, everyone? This is Brian over here at Ken Wilson Ford in Canton, North Carolina. And today I want to do a little bit of a different video than what I've done so far, and the fact that I actually wanted to compare two highly sought after SUVs. More and more people are buying SUVs now more than ever, and having a third row is very important to anybody that has kids or really just maybe wants to have more functionality, more purpose or things that they can do with their vehicle. So what I decided to do is I wanted to find two vehicles that we had in our inventory today, and both of them needed to be under $30,000. Both of these are right about the $29,000 mark. I wanted them to have less than 60,000 miles, and they both had to be comparable in features as far as being all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, having of course that third row seat, and then comparable in features. So behind me I actually have two vehicles that fit these bills perfectly. We actually have a 2017 Ford Explorer XLT, and then we also have a 2017 GMC Acadia, and this is going to be the SLT2 package. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to break this down into 5 main categories. We're going to kind of compare them both as far as styling, then we're going to look at how their performance is and different specifications with that, and then we're going to compare the different features and technology they both come with. And then I want to actually get inside and compare the overall interior. How was the quality? How was the space? How was the storage in the back of these two things? And then the last thing we're going to do is actually going to get both on the road and actually compare them and see, maybe how this one drives or how that one drives, maybe which one feels a little bit faster. So let's not waste any time. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Alrighty, to get things started, we're actually going to take a look at the 2017 GMC Acadia. Now again, this is the SLT2 package, which is one of the higher trim levels you can actually get for these Acadias. They have several different models. It's probably a little bit more confusing than the Explorer model lineup can be, but the SLT2 has the most that's allowed with tech as far as different engine choices and as well as different technology features and things like that. So as we kind of come around here, you can see kind of the GMC touch on stuff. So we've got a mixture of black plastic cladding down here on the bottom half of the body, kind of gives it a little bit of that sporty SUV, maybe off-roady look to it. But then there is this contrast of chrome where we actually have, the classic GMC chrome grille, the chrome trim around the fog lights. We've got chromed headlights. And then we follow around with that trim more in the rear. Of course, you've got chrome badging. You've got chrome or aluminum looking roof bars. And then we have that same kind of chrome trim on the back as well as the silver on the back bumper. Now this GMC actually has a tow package installed, which gives it about a 4,000 pound max capacity for towing, which is actually pretty good. Some of the things that I do like about the exterior of this, I do like the color on this one specifically. I'm not normally a huge fan of red cars, but this one has a little bit more of a darker burgundy look to it. So that's one thing that I do like. And of course, this does actually have 20-inch wheels on it. It's going to ride a little bit differently than some of your other SUVs, but having the 20-inch wheels is going to give it a little bit more of a sporty feeling without having too much of a rough ride. The wheel package is actually pretty decent. If you look closely, it's a combination of a machine polish there on the edges. We'll kind of zoom in a little bit. So you can see we've got the edges here polished, but then we've also got this painted section here in the middle. So it does give it a nice kind of contrast that matches well with the chrome and black two-tone here. Of course, you've got a sloped front end, the boxy rear end, and the overall dimensions of this thing looks pretty proportional. All right, now time to check out the exterior of the 2017 Ford Explorer XLT. Now, I have mixed feelings about what I think about this car. This revision of the Explorer has actually been around since the early 2010s, 2012, 2013, 2014, that time frame. And in the 2017 model year, they did actually have a revision on this. Now, from the back of the car, this is actually going to look very similar to the earlier models with just slightly different kind of shaped taillights and maybe the rear bumper shaped a little bit differently. The biggest change we're going to have between the generations is the front. So in the earlier models of this generation, they had a little bit more of a kind of rounded look on the headlights, and they also kind of had like a split design where they would run down the side of the taillights. For this generation, they kind of squared off things a little bit more, made the headlights a little bit more boxy looking, changed up the grille, The location, I think the fog lights here are just a little bit different. So I kind of have mixed feelings. I overall think it's a great looking SUV. I like the fact that it actually has just really clean lines, but the fact that they didn't really do too much for the generation on this model year, you know, does kind of disappoint me. Now overall though, I do like the way it looks. We do also have 20-inch wheels here, much like the GMC. That's pretty much a standard at this size. A lot of times you'll have 18-inch wheels standard for a lot of these models, but once you get up to like the XLTs or the Platinums or any of those kind of trim levels, you're pretty much always going to have the 20 inches. Now these are about the same tire profile. I think these tires are a little bit taller, so it should ride a little bit differently on the highway. We don't have near as much chrome here, or at least it's a little bit more subdued. You've got it back here on the Explorer badge, and then you've got it on the wheels, of course, which are more of like a polished aluminum look. And then you've got a little bit more of that brushed aluminum look here on the grille. So not near as much chrome as the GMC, but the GMCs are kind of known for having that look. I personally think that the Explorer looks a little bit more meaty looking, maybe a little bit more sporty looking than the Acadia. Acadia definitely comes across as a little bit more of a luxury look. Now, as we kind of come around here as well, this particular model does have vent visors on it. Looks like the stick-on kind. And then we do, of course, have roof bars. Now, where Ford differs from a lot of different companies is rather than having more traditional roof bars, these roof bars are a little bit more flush mounted to the body, which does help with drag and aero and miles per gallon fuel economy, things like that. But at the same time, you do actually have to buy the Ford specific crossbars so you can actually use these. So as we kind of zoom in here, you can kind of see along the rail here, you will have some hardware, some bolts you can just remove, some Torx bolts, and that's how you would actually add your bars to the roof of it. Comparing numbers on both of these SUVs actually shows that there are a lot of similarities between the two, but then there are also some stark differences between the two. Now, as far as comparing these two vehicles specifically, you know, I said at the beginning of the video, I wanted to make sure both vehicles were under 60,000 miles. In this case, they actually both have under 50,000 miles, with the GMC having right about 46,000 miles and the Explorer having right around 48,000 miles. So you can see in their price brackets, they are actually very comparable. Now, going on to different performance ratings, they both have a V6. In this case, the GMC actually outsteps the Explorer, where the GMC has right around 310 horsepower with 271 foot-pounds of torque, and that is compared to the Explorer XLT's 290 horsepower with 255 foot-pounds of torque. Now, I should note, you can actually get the Explorer Sport for the 2017 model year. And I thought about actually comparing that one with the GMC, but since the GMC wasn't necessarily a sport model, I wanted to actually try to keep it apples to apples. But if you were to look at the Explorer Sport model, and that was something that you cared for, the Sport actually blows away the Acadia in this case with 365 horsepower and 350 foot-pounds of torque. And of course, that's going to be out of the twin-turbo V6 versus the naturally aspirated V6 that comes in the Explorer XLT. Now, moving on from there, the Acadia actually has a really nice package. They call it the Driver Alert Package 2, and this has a ton of different safety features. You have, they call it Side Blind Zone Alert with Lane Change Alert. That's your lane centering. You've got a low-speed front automatic braking system. You've got pedestrian detection. You've got IntelliBeam headlights, front and rear park assist where you have the sensors. In this case, when you're actually reversing or moving forward, the sensors actually buzz in the seat. So it's not just an audible sound. You actually get a little bit of a vibration in this seat, also letting you know that you are getting too close to something. With the GMC, you also have the rear cross traffic alert, lane keep assist, follow distance indicator, forward collision alert, and safety driver alert. So you've got a ton of stuff included with the package, and that's specifically with this SLT2 and with that. So that'd be a very expensive package if you were to buy this brand new back in 2017. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we also have the trailering package included on this, which allows for 4,000-pound towing. It's got the 7-pin wiring harness, and it's got a Class 3 hitch included. It also gives you a heavy-duty cooling system, so it's going to be a larger capacity radiator. That's going to mean you can actually move up and down these hills and keep the engine at the right temperatures. Now, you do have 5 drive modes. We'll get into that more when we're in the interior. Both SUVs actually will have these drive modes. The big difference between the 4-wheel drive system is the Acadia, in this case, has an all-wheel drive system, which really just means it's a little bit more front-wheel drive biased. Generally this is sold as a front-wheel drive vehicle unless you upgrade to the all-wheel drive. And in this case, the Explorer actually has a 4-wheel drive system. And the 4-wheel drive system actually does include automatic locking hubs. So if going off-road, or if getting in sand or dirt or gravel or anything like that is important to you, the Explorer actually has a little bit of a better 4-wheel drive system. Now, I'm not taking these out in the mud to actually see which one digs itself out better, but just in general, the Explorer definitely has a little bit better of a 4-wheel drive system. Now, if we compare ground clearance with the two, this is another feature where the Ford actually steps out the GMC. You can tell the GMC in this case is definitely built to be a little bit more like a car, and the Explorer is built to be a little bit more like an SUV or maybe even a truck. So with ground clearance, with the Explorer, you have 8.3 inches of ground clearance. That's the minimum ground clearance. And then for the GMC, you've got 7.2. So, I mean, it's not a huge difference, but you definitely have an inch difference of ground clearance, and that does matter to some. Now, some other things that the Explorer does beat out the Acadia when it comes to numbers is the cargo area and the interior dimensions. Now, it should note that in the GMC, there is one category that it does beat the Explorer in, and that is actually the second row legroom. Now, it just barely beats it out. Based on the numbers, the second row actually has 39.5 inches of room in the Explorer. In the GMC, you've got 39.7. So you can see it just barely, kind of edges it out. Now, in every other capacity, the Ford Explorer, as far as interior, does actually beat the Acadia. In this case, the GMC Acadia has 6 seats. It's got 2 rows for every, or 2 seats for every row, and the Explorer actually seats 7. So you do have a little bit with the numbers out of the way. Let's go ahead and start pushing some buttons. Now, as far as the dimensions of things, that both one area where the Explorer actually blows away the Acadia is the GMC Acadia. So if you were to flatten all the seats, the second row and the third row, we're going to have, and just look at how much cargo volume typical keyless entry with a push button start. We also have the automated has about tailgate, roughly 80, as well as the remote start. So in this case, we'll go ahead and just push the engine start button. And the GMC has 79, so they're pretty even there. But where things change is when you actually start putting up the different seats. Now, this GMC does actually have the second row screens on it. You just have the third row down. We have the one here on the center dashboard, 43 cubic feet, which can, of course, be controlled by the Explorer, and 41 steering wheel controls here in the Acadia. And then we have the one that's here on the dashboard. Now, the biggest difference, if I'm not mistaken, one that's here on the dashboard is an 8-inch standing up. The Explorer blows away the Acadia, where the Explorer has 21 cubic feet. One thing that I do like about this is it's actually really responsive. Acadia has so as you click on things, so you can definitely tell the Explorer is a little bit of a bigger as we move into the GPS now, here. As far as you can see, you do actually have a little bit more room in the Explorer. If you want to zoom out or if you want to zoom in, you can do that. It's about an inch more legroom in the front. We talked about that little less room in the second row. Let's try this. And then you've got almost an inch more of the legroom in the rear. Now this will matter more when I'm actually getting in all of the different, locations and seeing how well I fit. So we'll just say, let's go to the Ramada in Asheville. So you can see how quickly that's searched and how easy it is to get started. Even though 2017 wasn't that long ago, it's important to note just how, technology changes over the years. And a lot of times when you go to a slightly older SUV or car, these infotainment screens can be a little bit laggy. And I think this one's actually decent. Where I might actually not like this infotainment screen is it has a little bit of a confusing layout. I like the way that it looks. It has a good look to it. The screen is very sharp, but when you're actually just looking at it, it's not super intuitive. So obviously we can go in and adjust our music here. We do have some phone settings. We've of course got the GPS. You can pair your phone with this. That's the projection it's talking about there. And then you can actually get like your different text messages and things. So in that case, it's a little bit, easy to use, but if you're just looking at it, like right now, you have to push this home button to kind of go back to the normal view. So you also have this like app view. So you've got different views. So I guess that's a good thing. If you like to customize your look, you want to have, a different view for things, you can do that. For 2017, I will actually say this screen has a lot more going on with it than most of them do. Now you can still use the buttons down here. So if you want to control things from here, of course you can power, your system on and off. You can go in here to the radio. You can jump to the different media like Bluetooth or things like that. You can hit the home button as we looked at. You've got your back button, and then you've got a menu button, which in this case doesn't really do a whole lot. It just kind of move things around. And then you've got that center button here that you can kind of push. It definitely took me a few minutes to kind of get used to what I'm looking for on here. But as we go into the settings, one thing that I did think was cool was you actually have a lot more stuff in here than I was expecting. So you can see you've got a rear seat reminder, which is kind of sad that we have to have that in today's time frame. That's basically where it'll tell you as you turn the car off. A little indicator will pop up there and say, hey, make sure you check your back seats, make sure there's no, kids, or pets or anything back there. This does have a valet mode. It's kind of weird that I think these SUVs have valet modes. Like, I don't know who's really going to go. I used to be a valet manager. I'm not really sure who's going to be out there hot dogging in an SUV, but whatever, it's there. As we go into other vehicle settings, you can actually control your auto fan speed. So if you don't want it to have it to go any higher than low or medium or high, you can do that there. That was neat. That's usually something that's, reserved for more high-end luxury models like Cadillacs or Lincolns, things like that. You've got auto defog, which I thought was neat. And you've got that auto rear defrog as well. So you can control some different lighting stuff, your different remote starts. So quite a bit on here that I thought was kind of shocking. And as we go here, there's a teen driver mode, which is kind of neat. That's something that I believe is included with the package that we talked about there. So we'll cancel out of that. Let's see here. You only have a rear camera on this, but you can adjust it. The rear camera does have pretty decent image quality. And as you turn the steering wheel, I like that it does show the parking lines. I think that's something that I think all vehicles have at this point. But in 2017, it was kind of, more and more vehicles are switching over to that, but not all were doing it. Other things that this has as far as buttons and features is, of course, we do have heated seats. Now, this one doesn't have any cooled seats, and I could not find anything in the settings for a heated steering wheel. Let me actually see if we can figure this out together. I looked earlier, so let's maybe go to, I doubt it would be weather. Let's see here. So you do have, one thing I will note, so there is no steering wheel heated controls, but you do actually have 3 automatic settings. So you can obviously have your dual front and rear passengers, but then you do actually have the controls back here, and then you can control it here where you can adjust the rear with an auto climate. I think it's actually something that's kind of neat. So as we look down here, you can see we have different drive modes. Now right here, it's obviously going to be in our standard 2-wheel drive mode. We do have a 4-wheel drive mode. That's pretty typical all-wheel drive. Looks like we've got a sport mode, and then we've got like an all-terrain mode, like an off-road mode, and then of course, this one specifically is going to have your tow mode. And then of course, you can have your parking sensors where you can turn those off, which is important if you have a trailer. And then of course, you've got your lane keep assist, which you can turn on or turn off. Now, one thing that I have to say I'm not a huge fan of, just from kind of playing around with this, is as you're adjusting different settings on here, I don't really see any indication on the dashboard as far as what is going on. So let's just see if I turn lane keep assist on or off. There is no notification on any of the screens that we've done so. Same thing if I change the modes. So if I put it into sport mode, nothing changes here. And I think that's kind of a bummer. When I was playing with this earlier, I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't think it's super intuitive, and you really have to be paying attention to here. So it's kind of a bummer is you were to set this in a certain mode and forget it, It's, you know, there's no other way of really getting a reminder on the gauge cluster anywhere. Most vehicles at this point will actually show you on the dashboard what's going on with the drive modes. So I'm actually not a huge fan of that. Of course, up here, a lot of people have questions when they see this kind of thing. These huge boxes that you have now on these newer vehicles behind the rear view cameras, that's going to be where all of the rear view mirrors, rather, that's going to be where all the different sensors, safety sensors, all the lane keep assist, you're going to have a lot of stuff that's kept up there. Other than that, all GMs or GMCs are known for having their OnStar features, what you can see is here, and then your pretty typical sunglass pocket, things like that. All right, now that we're in the rear of the car, again, I wanted to just point out the automatic climate controls here. So if you can actually change that from here, you can adjust the fan speed specifically for the rear. And of course, you do have the vents that come out of the roof here. That's actually something that's kind of neat. You know, all vehicles nowadays have power ports. In this case, you actually have 3. So you've got like a 110 plug here. I guess this one says it's a 120. So you've got your 120 plug for like a house plug, for like a laptop or something. And then you've got 2 USB-A's. And then one thing that I did think was kind of interesting back here is you actually have this, like, you know, removable, really deep pocket. So I guess you could kind of have this like a tech pocket, or maybe fit a small book in there, or some snacks or anything like that for a road trip. But that's something that I thought was kind of interesting. Of course, like I talked about before, this GMC specifically has the 2x2x2 layout, 2 seats in the front, 2 in the middle, and 2 in the rear. So that does make it, you know, easy to kind of get access to the rear seats, and I'll actually show you now how those work. So as you can see, we actually have some controls here. So with that one latch, you can actually move that down, which makes it a little bit easier to climb in the back seat here. And then of course, to put it back up, you just lift it back up. Now you do also have, you can have the seat move forward here. So if you just move the top latch, that is another way of doing it. Again, you can just pull that and the whole seat would just kind of move forward. So that's another way of doing it. Now, of course, one thing to also note is if you were to have the seat down in this position, if you had anybody sitting in the back, they could actually extend their legs out here, maybe use it as like a table or something like that. It kind of gives you a little bit more room. Now, as we put the seat back up, you can also adjust underneath of here. You're going to have your regular manual slider, so you can actually move this forward and backwards, and you can actually move it forward quite a bit. Obviously you can move it forward to the point where I don't think anybody's really going to fit back here, but again, if you're just wanting to, you know, give more room for the rear seats, that's something you can do. Now, of course, both are captain's chairs, so you're going to have your folding armrests, so that's kind of interesting. And then we do also have a decent amount of pockets. You know, these SUVs are going to have usually kids and stuff in the back, or they're going to be good for road trips. You can see we've got, you know, cup holders. We've got a little bit of a storage pocket there. And of course, you've got your regular door pocket. You do have map lights back here for both, and you have map lights for the rear, as you can see back there. Now, kind of looking at the rear of this one, something that I thought was interesting is the way they can kind of control the height of the automatic rear hatch is you actually have this dial right here. So you can hear it beeping at me. You can have it where it's just a manual open, or it'll open 3/4 of the way, which is good for like a garage or like a low ceiling area. And then you've got your max. So if we just go ahead and set it to max and we push the button, of course you can see the automatic tailgate opens. And now we're in the back of it. So as we talked about before, we don't have really a ton of room back here if you actually have the rear seats up. And one thing that I'm not really a huge fan of either is just how cramped it is back here in general. Now let's see how easy it is to put these seats down. I imagine we just pull these straps here. I don't see any automatic systems here. All right, so there we go. We actually have a little bit more room when we pull those back. You can adjust the headrest here, as you can see. But as you can see, it's just very cramped back here. You do have a little bit of storage under here, but not a whole lot. You do have these extra cup holders, which of course are kind of interesting. Definitely kind of cramped back here. You're generally not going to fit a ton of stuff back here if you actually have all 3 seats up. Now let's see if we can figure out how to intuitively put these seats down. Now, as I am back here, I do notice that we do have more charge ports back here. That's something that I think is kind of neat. We've got them over here on the driver's side rear seat, and strangely enough, we don't have it over here on the passenger side. So if you're sitting in the back and you need to charge your phone, you're just gonna have to do it from the one side. So yeah, let's see if we can figure out how to get these seats to go down now. So I did have to do it with 2 hands. You basically pull the latch. It's just one same system. So you just pull it and it flattens. Nothing power or anything on this. Now you actually have some decent room. It's not a super low floor or anything like that. You're not able to collapse these down into the floor like a minivan. But you do have a little bit more room back here. And then of course, if we were to flatten those 2 front seats, you're gonna have a pretty flat area if you need to load maybe some small furniture or something like that. At this point, we're gonna move into the Explorer. And as you can see, we have the same kind of thing, push button start. So in this case, we actually have technically 4 screens. It's kind of interesting to get in both of these and kind of see, you know, the design language between how both consider what they think an interior should be like, especially when it comes to interior design. Now, as we go into here, we actually have both of these screens are for different vehicle information. So you can see I've got the hood up on both. Now, you do have a lot more buttons here. So you've got buttons on both sides of the steering wheel, and you can see that controls that screen and this controls that screen. So if we push some of this here, you can actually switch that around from being an RPM gauge to having different stuff with the fuel. You can see now we've got the fuel with the engine temperature, tire pressure, speedometer, the 4-wheel drive system, the actual 4-wheel drive system. And in this case, you can actually see where it talks about the different modes, the different drive modes. Mud rut mode. And that's what I'm more used to when it comes to having these different dials for things. I think that's kind of, you know, missed on the GMC. Now for this other screen, this is kind of more your multimedia screen here. As we kind of go through the different things, you can see we've got, this is where you're gonna have your different media controls. And I guess right now, since we have, there we go. So there we go. I had to turn the radio on so we can actually go into entertainment. This is where you can look at, like, you know, your different radio presets. You can go through and switch it from AM. You can, you know, switch it to Bluetooth and all kinds of different things. There's your Bluetooth phone stuff. So that's kind of what that right screen does. Now, as we move here to the center screen, this screen is smaller. I think it's like a 6-inch screen compared to the 8-inch screen on the GMC, but they're both pretty comparable. You can kind of see they both fit the dashboards about equally. I do think this layout is a little bit easier to understand. So right now we just have all of our controls here on the bottom. So you can go through your different climate or your different radio sources. You got Bluetooth, Sirius. Now this is actually pretty quick as well. I would say both of these are about tied on that. You can adjust your climate control from here if you like that, or in these years you can actually adjust it down here. This is a big improvement from the earlier models. I will say that changed in 2017. In the older models, you didn't have as much controls down here. Everything had to be done from the touchscreen, and I really thought that was kind of a problem. You could adjust a couple things down here, but not much. Now at this point, you can adjust everything you want to do from here or from here, just depending on what's easier for you. Now, of course, you do have auto climate control, which is to be expected. You've got your dual zone. You do have rear air, but it is not a dual automatic rear air like you have in the GMC. You can actually see here, you do have it, but it's a manual control. So coming back up here to the front, ironically, you still have a CD player. This is something that's, you know, kind of missing in a lot of newer vehicles now. You can see here, we've got different apps. Let's do this. So this one might not actually have, so this is definitely something to note. So this one does not have GPS included. That was not something that I apparently caught when I was looking over it. Normally you've got your navigation menu, but in this case, this one is lacking it. And that's actually really shocking with having this screen. Unless I'm just missing something somewhere. Let me see here. Wow, that is shocking. Yeah, you definitely do not have it. Now, both of these cars do have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. So I guess that's, you know, kind of how they're getting around it. But I'm still shocked in this case that we don't have GPS. That's definitely something that the GMC would kind of went out on. Now, as far as other kind of features and things, you've got lots of pockets. Of course, you've got, you know, charge ports. You know, as we're down here, both have the same style shifter. And a lot of the newer cars, they're going away from having these. Some have buttons, some have a dial, much like this. But you can see in the same area, we actually have the different drive modes for the 4-wheel drive. So you've got about the same modes as the other one. It does kind of break it down where you've got more of your all-terrain modes. and it's broken down with like mud, and then you've got your sand, and then you've got your like snow and ice, or just, you know, general wet conditions. And then you've got your hill descent. That's actually something that's kind of neat. That's on there. Of course, no tow mode with this one specifically. This one does not have a traditional tow package on it. You can see we've got more storage, more pockets, more charge ports. And then as we move up here, we don't have the same kind of camera array. You do have some parking assist features on this one, but not to the capacity of the other one. You're basically just going to have parallel parking on this one. That's about it. All right, now that we're in the rear, you can actually see, again, I'll point out these controls back here. They're not automatic, but you can control your fan speed, your different locations, and of course your temperature. You got more charge ports, no USB back here. I would say that's one thing kind of going along with the GPS stuff. The GMC has a little bit more tech, I would say. Now everything is usable in this. You don't have as much of a pocket. You've just got cup holders down here. So the GMC definitely has a little bit of a different take on that. Now to kind of look at the seats, again, this has got the 60-40 split. So this is where you're gonna fit 3 people in the back with the additional 2 people in the rear. So let's actually take a look at how you adjust these seats. So you can see in this case, you've got all your different seat controls here. So all you have to do is just lift that lever, and you can see it flattens that seat. And of course, we could do the same on the other side. Now, as far as getting in, what you have to do is you actually lift this lever here, and that's how that whole seat will kind of stand up and give you a ton more room to get in the back. In my opinion, in this instance, you actually have a lot more room for getting into that rear seat area. So we'll go ahead and flatten that back and stand it back up. This is always a little bit awkward when you're just doing it with one hand here. There we go. All right, now one thing that I did think was interesting about this is this side, the driver's side seat, does not actually have any rails where it can actually be adjusted. I thought that was something that was a little bit different, a little bit weird. I didn't expect that. If we look at the other side here, we can actually adjust the seat like we did with the GMC, where you can move it up or move it back. But for some reason, with the 60 part of the 60-40, you can't actually do that. Thought that was a little bit weird. Now, as we come back to the rear, we're gonna look at kind of how the hatch opens and how the seats fold down. Now, of course, you do have your button here. Both are gonna have the power lift gates. Now, Ford has a different way that you can adjust the height here. In Ford's opinion, you can actually adjust things from the button. So if you were to actually lower this to a certain point where you wanted it to be, and you press and hold this hatch button, it'll actually lock the open position to that point. So again, if you're in a garage or some other tight fitting area, that's gonna give you a little bit better clearance. All right, so now that we're looking in the back, you can just see how much extra room you have here. And this is where I was pointing out those numbers on storage space. If you're just fitting like, 4 or 5 people in this car, and you're just using it like a regular, car SUV, you have tons of room back here. I mean, looking from the inside of the tailgate all the way to the back seats, that's like 3 feet roughly is what it looks like, almost 3, maybe even 3.5 feet. Now this car specifically does have this rubber floor mat inside. So we're just gonna pull that out, and we'll actually show you how the seats work. Now, some of the Explorers of the Limiteds, and I have actually seen it with the XLTs, will have power seats with buttons on the side here. So in this instance, to actually lift up the rear seats, it's kind of this interesting contraption where the seats will actually rotate. So you can see we actually lift up that handle there, and that puts the seat into that position. Now, if we're wanting to rotate the seat up, I am gonna have to do this with 2 hands. So what you do there is you pull that latch there, and then you basically just lift this up, and then of course you've got your headrest here, and that's how you do it. So it is kind of interesting. So that's what I think is kind of fun about these third row seats in these Explorers, is just how those seats come up. Now, another thing that I do like is when you've got the third row seat up, you do have some space back here. Again, more space than you have in the GMC, but it's actually deeper storage as well. So now if you're holding suitcases or something like that, you've got almost another 6 to 9 inches of storage where you can stack things a little bit deeper, like suitcases or anything like that. So that's one thing that I thought was actually pretty neat. So now we'll go ahead and put these seats down. What's actually kind of interesting is if you play with the different latch pieces, if you adjust one of these straps, you can even lean the sucker back quite a bit. I don't really know why you would do that. I guess maybe you could fold it and that's just part of how it comes back down. That was just kind of funny. So what we'll do right now is we'll just go ahead and put this forward and then pull these latches and we'll get this to roll back. So right now let's jump in the front seat of the Explorer since that's where we just were. We'll go ahead and kind of get our seat adjusted. Now I'm about 6'3", so I've got a decent amount of space back here. Now if I were to put the seat all the way to the rear, it's almost too much space. So I'd almost say you could be like 7 feet tall and still have plenty of room in here. There's tons of headroom in this as well. I believe the Explorer has a little bit more head height here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of adjust this seat to where I would normally be. So I like to be probably right around there. We'll adjust the seat up here. Now you can adjust the seat going up or down. That's pretty normal now. And then of course you have different adjustments here with lumbar support, the bottom of the seat if you want to make it go up or down, the tilt of the seat. So you've got a lot of different options here. Both vehicles are gonna be kind of comparable there. To adjust the steering wheel in this case, we're going to have just this handle here. So you can see it's tilt and telescoping. Not power tilt and telescoping, but I usually like to have it right here. And let's go ahead and pull the steering wheel a little bit closer to us. We'll lock this back into place. So this is about right for me. Now, something that I'm looking at here is there is a decent amount of room right here when it comes to the actual dashboard. I like that the center console actually feels close to you, but at the same time, you really got this kind of open air feeling where the dashboard and the doors, everything kind of connect. It feels a little bit, actually feels a lot bigger in here compared to the GMC. Now that we've got this front seat set, let's go ahead and jump into the back here. So now let's see how much room I actually have in the rear seat. And you can see we've adjusted that front seat to where I would normally be. Now, if you come back here, you definitely have somewhat of an upright seating position. I have a decent amount of space here. I would say with my knees together, I have probably about 2 inches or so of leg room here. If I were to extend my legs out and kind of relax a little bit, maybe I can recline the seat some. I would say it's comfortable enough. It's a little tight here than I would prefer it to be. I believe if I move over here to where this side can actually adjust, I'm actually gonna have a little bit more room back here, maybe about 1 inch of room with the fact that this can actually slide back. But now the fun part is, let's see how easy it is for me to get into the back seat. That's what's gonna be fun on both of these. All right, getting into the third row. All right, so let's go ahead and put the headrest down, lay this forward, and then we'll go ahead and put the seat all the way forward. All right, so this is where I do think it's a lot easier to get in this thing. So let's go ahead and climb back in here. All right, now with the seat up like this, it's actually really nice. If it was me riding in the back seat of this thing, I'm pretty sure I would just ride with it just like this all the time. Can actually extend my legs out. You probably can't even see me, but it's actually quite luxurious back here. Now let's see how things drastically change, however, when I actually put the seat back. So it's already starting to get tight. We'll lay this forward. And now I am 100% in the back seat of this thing. Now, I don't know if you can even see me at all at this point, but I would honestly say for a third row SUV, this is the first time I've actually been in the back of one of these things with the seat all the way up. It's actually not that bad. There is no seat adjustment for the third row seats as far as, you know, kind of moving them forwards or backwards. If I were to sit straight up, I mean, my knees are definitely touching the back bench here. You're generally not gonna fit adults back here on a regular day, but for kids, there's actually plenty of room. For adults, if you had to cram 6 or 7 people in here for a short trip, you could definitely do it. For anybody that's not 6'3", I think they might actually have a decent amount of room back here, but I'm not gonna pretend that it's luxurious. So now let's see how easy it is for somebody in the rear seat to actually get out. So I'm fairly certain I can just pull that. You can actually do everything in basically just 2 steps with the same strap. So that is something that is kind of handy about the back side of things here. Now again, getting back in and out works out really well with the setup like it is. Now let's kind of look at the GMC and kind of see how much room somebody at 6'3" would have in this vehicle. So as we hop in, you know, we've got the same kind of seat adjustment here. You know, if I go all the way back with it, Definitely reminds me a lot of the Explorer in that case, as far as just how much room. I mean, I could really extend myself out if I wanted to. So we'll go ahead and just kind of adjust the seat. It almost looks like we have the same kind of adjustability on the seat controls, as far as the lumbar, the back of it there. A lot of the same stuff. You can raise it up or down. I'm pretty sure it's the same exact. I think it's like an 8-way adjustable or something like that. As far as headroom goes, I would say it's decent in here. There might be a little bit more with the Explorer, but it feels about the same here. And then if we adjust the steering wheel, it's very similar to the Explorer as well. We just have a latch underneath, and then we can go up or down. This one does not have any telescoping. It won't come closer to me, but it will go up and down. That's something that's actually kind of interesting. I would have figured that the GMC would have had both options, but there's only one lever, and that's the only way. So let's just kind of adjust that to where I would normally have it. Finish the seat adjustment here. Yep, I would say that's pretty good. So now I'll top in the back seat and see how much room I would have in the second row. All right, so now we're in the second row of seating, and I might actually say, I think we saw this in the numbers as well, there is a little bit more rear leg room for the second row. Now I do also feel like I'm sitting up pretty high, and in case, yeah, this is one that does adjust on both sides. Now right now I have this adjusted all the way back. And that's, if I was gonna be sitting in the back seat, that's exactly how I would wanna have it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave it like that, and then we'll kind of jump in the third row and kind of see how it feels back there. Now, as far as headroom and shoulder room, something that I noticed from the front and the back seat of this one is the roof definitely slopes down a little bit closer here. The Explorer has a little bit more of a taller roof, and my head does feel like it has more room in the Explorer. Now, I do have plenty of room in here, but it definitely has a little bit more of a cramped feeling with as far out as you're pushed into the side of the car. The Explorer is kind of sits you a little bit more in the center versus being so pushed out to the edge. But overall, I would say the second row in the GMC, I do actually feel a good bit more comfortable back here, even with the front seat adjusted for myself. So now the fun part is, let's see how we can jump into the rear of this thing. All right, so now we're gonna climb into the back seat here. So let's see if I can remember the steps. We'll flatten that, pull the lever here, and I wonder if there is a way to move this forward anymore. From looking at it, I don't actually think there is. So what we're just gonna do is we're just gonna climb over like I'm guessing they intend you to do. So we'll go ahead and climb in here, get around my camera tripod. Well, I guess I should put this rear seat up, shouldn't I? There we go. All right, now we can jump in. All right, so as we jump back in here, this is not easy for a tall guy. So already I can definitely tell it is a lot more cramped back here. So let's just get all the way in here. Man, it is super cramped back here. This was definitely something that was noted on the specifications, but now that I'm back here, it feels super cramped, and I don't even have the third row up. So let's go ahead and adjust this now. Put this up to the up position. Oh man, it is locked into the full up position, and I can honestly say, with me being back here, there is absolutely no room for adults back here. I don't know how the dimensions seem so close on paper, but with me actually being back here, if I can't even not, ooh, man, I can't even get my feet underneath the seat. This is tighter than coach on an airplane, golly. So now I have tucked both of my legs back in here, and I might actually have to grab the camera to kind of show you what's going on, but it is super tight. So yeah, now I want to show you from the back seat just how cramped this actually is. Now I did find out that you can adjust things. This seat will actually slide forward, so it probably would be a little bit easier to get in and out with that versus having to climb over it. But it's definitely not as easy to get into the rear seat as it would be with the Explorer, with the fact that it kind of rolls all the way forward. But you can kind of see as I get in here, you can kind of see already how much space I'm going to have to deal with. But as we move the seat back, so right now it's in the locked kind of bottom position. As I stand this up, watch this. Oh man. So that seat is all the way back, and you can see how much of a struggle it is to even get my other leg in here. This is definitely not a third row of seats you're ever going to actually fit adults back in here, unless they just don't have legs or they're Tyrion Lannister. But that's kind of a big disappointment. I was actually thinking this is going to have a little bit more room back here than it does, considering you're giving up so much storage space in the back here. But the fact of the matter is you have way less storage back here, and you have way less space back here. So again, move that forward, and we'll see if it's any easier to get out of this this way. Here we go. Oh my gosh. Oh. Whew. Alrighty, and we are out of this thing. All right, now that we've talked these two vehicles to death, I think the best thing to do is just actually get out and kind of drive them around and kind of see how they feel compared to one another. Now, one thing that I have noticed so far with the GMC from the little bit that I have driven it around is it definitely in general feels a lot more like a car and less like a truck, I guess. It's a little bit softer. The steering feels pretty light. You can definitely tell it's a power assisted steering. But it's very smooth. It actually kind of reminds me of like a Lexus or something like that. I wouldn't say that it's sluggish. It actually feels pretty responsive. The driving angle here, the hood sits pretty far up and doesn't really taper off. It has a little bit of that boxiness to it. One thing that I do think is interesting about this one is it is actually pretty quick. As we noted, you know, we've got over 300 horsepower on this thing. And let's actually kind of hammer it and see kind of how it does. So it's actually pretty quick. We just hit 60 miles an hour on a little back road here. But the one thing that I can say about it is it has a ton of torque steer. And that was something that shocked me. I guess really it shouldn't shock me given the fact that this is an all-wheel drive platform versus a kind of four-wheel drive platform. And what's crazy is we are in two-wheel drive, so maybe if I switched it into four-wheel drive, it would feel a little bit different. And let's actually do that real quick. So we'll just kind of switch it into the all-wheel drive mode, and it is now set. We'll floor it again. All right, so all-wheel drive mode definitely does feel a lot more linear. When I was in a front-wheel drive or two-wheel drive mode there, I had a ton of torque steer. It was actually kind of jerking me. It tends to really want to steer to the right when it's like that. That was kind of something that I was disappointed in. Now, as far as cabin noise, it's actually pretty quiet in here. You've got decent viewing angle. It's kind of an interesting way the dashboard and everything is shaped. We'll kind of pull a U-turn here. Brakes feel pretty solid, not like a sports car or anything there, but they're definitely good pedal feel for an SUV. Now we're on these gravel kind of bumps and stuff like that. And yeah, it actually feels pretty smooth. It definitely feels, like I said, kind of like a car with decent ground clearance. You know, again, we're still in four-wheel drive mode, which honestly most people don't even need. I think it's kind of shocking how many people want a four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive and really never use them for that. But overall, I do actually like the driving characteristics. We'll get into the Explorer here in a minute, and I'll kind of tell you what I actually like a little bit more about the Explorer versus this. All right, so now we're going to take a drive in the Explorer, and spoiler alert, one thing I must say is I actually do like the interior of the Explorer as far as the driving characteristics much more than the GMC. I think a lot of that is just because of the way the dashboard is shaped. Now in the GMC, you've got a much more squared off boxy dashboard. It sits a little bit higher and you kind of feel like you're more sunken into the vehicle. And this, I actually feel like there's a much more smooth transition from, you know, the driver's cockpit area. The dashboard kind of swoops up towards the windshield. There's also a ton of room between me and the A-pillar. Now, both of these cars are going to have absolutely huge A-pillars. That's just a safety feature for a lot of new cars. But what I like is if I were to sit up at like a normal driving position and I reach out, it's almost impossible without me leaning forward for me to touch the base of the A-pillar or the top of the dashboard or over here next to the mirror area. So there actually feels like there's a lot more room in here. In the GMC, as I stated earlier, you're kind of pushed out towards the edges of the vehicle where you're sitting almost up against the door. But with Ford, their kind of methodology with this, especially when it comes to all their SUV lineups for that matter, is to actually separate yourself a little bit from the door. So my seat actually has a few inches of clearance before it hits the door here. So in general, especially as a tall guy, I feel like I have a whole lot more headroom here. And then I also feel like I have a lot just more shoulder room. I don't feel as cramped in here. So it's just kind of an interesting difference between the two. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the GMC, but personally, I actually prefer, you know, kind of the driving characteristics so far of the Explorer here. Now we're going to take this on the same little back stretch and kind of floor it. Now the GMC again had a two-wheel drive mode where you could manually set it there, where you had to put it in four-wheel. This one has an intelligent four-wheel drive system. So if you're not needing the four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive system, it's not going to engage it. So right now we just have it in the normal mode, and what we'll do is we'll just kind of floor it like we did in the other case. So it's definitely not as quick as the Acadia, but it's not like the two are that far apart. I mean, on paper, we're only really talking about a 20 horsepower difference between the two, and there's no telling how they actually shake out in the real world as far as, you know, actual performance numbers, especially after they've both had 50,000 miles on them roughly. But the GMC is definitely a little bit quicker. If you were to get them exactly back to back, you might notice it. I think the throttle response is a little bit better in the GMC compared to the Ford. But honestly, you're not going to notice that much of a difference between the two. It's definitely not enough to really give a massive win to the GMC. I will say this V6 seems a little bit louder. That could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing, but you can kind of tell there when we were flooring it, there was a lot more V6 engine noise coming out of this one than before. So now that we're actually kind of on the road here, this definitely has a little bit of a different vantage point. As I kind of said, the dashboard and the hood are shaped a little bit different. But as we come up here to these bumps, where I'm going to kind of pull a U-turn, this is kind of one of the bigger driving characteristics differences between the two, where the GMC does feel a lot more like a car, as I stated earlier. The Explorer has a much more kind of, I guess, confidence-inspiring off-road kind of truck-like feeling to it. So I'm going over these pretty steep little inclines here, going from a gravel to a paved road. And while it is pretty smooth, I would say the GMC is definitely smoother. It's kind of hard to describe. You can just kind of tell this is a little bit more capable off-road. I don't know if it's just the ground clearance. I don't know if it's just the difference in the tires, but you definitely don't feel, you're not concerned, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You're not concerned about taking it over those bumps. It just feels normal. It feels natural. You know, again, there's no torque steer with this. Of course, with that four-wheel drive system, you're not going to have that as a problem. You know, you have very minimal safety features, you know, compared to the GMC, so that's something to kind of take into consideration. But as far as driving it around, I personally am going to give the win to the Explorer here. So, which one's better? I'm actually going to leave this up to y'all. The whole point of this video was not to pick out which one that I would recommend. My point was just to kind of put these two vehicles side by side. Both are popular, the GMC Acadia and the Ford Explorer, and really compare the two side by side and really let you be the one that judges, you know, what's more important to you. If you're looking for something that has more technology, with built-in navigation, with more safety features, then in this case, the GMC is the clear winner. But if you're looking for something that's maybe a little bit more rugged and durable off-road, also while allowing to have more space, especially for that third row seat, then the Explorer is going to be your best bet. Honestly, they are not the same vehicle. They are very different from each other, and they have a really good trade-off between the two. That's what I think is really so fun about just being into cars and selling cars, is there's really no two vehicles that are the same. They have different things in mind. So the GMC wants to be a little bit more luxurious, and the Explorer wants to be a little bit more utilitarian. Does that mean they have some trade-offs? Of course. But what's interesting is they are both the same price, both have pretty much the same miles, have very similar options. So at this point, you know, it's up to you to decide which one you like more. So again, I thank you so much for your time. My name is Brian Cooper over here at Ken Wilson Ford. Thank you and have a great day.